You bought a new car.
Yeah, finally.
What is it? A
So
Ford Flex or something like that?
Yeah, it's a Ford Flex.
Okay.
So I've got, I guess, kind of a story about that.
Do tell.
A lot of it's just the typical, like, purchasing a car headaches you'd expect dealing with dealerships. But I had kind of been, like, dead set on getting a Flex because I needed something big enough to fit the whole family in, but I didn't want to drive a minivan every day. And there's only, like a handful of cars that meet those requirements. And of those, I liked the Flex the most. The Flex is not a popular car. It's been around for almost 10 years, and it sold really poorly. I think it averaged like 25,000 a year. And most of those were going to like rental fleets. So there was only one for sale anywhere near me, and it was a used one at a Kia dealership. And I went into the Kia dealership and sat down with I test drove it. I sat down with the salesperson. We talked numbers for a little bit, and the salesperson offered me like this ridiculous financing on the car. But I think, so first he came back, he's like, all right, I talked to my finance person, this is what we can do. And he just came a piece of paper that said $440 a month. I was like, okay, what's the interest on this? What's the term of the loan? This seems really high for anything. He's like, oh, I don't know any of those numbers.
What are you even doing?
What do you mean you don't?
Like, you don't know the terms of the deal you're offering? What?
He was doing that thing where like you say something, he's like, oh, I gotta go ask my manager. So he goes to the manager's office, and he like whatever, and then he comes back, he's like, well, this is what she says, and it's like back and forth every time I said anything. But anyway, I come to find out later, like their initial offer was like a 33% APR.
That's insane.
I guess they're just
exists?
It's completely insane.
That doesn't seem even legal.
It seems, it's crazy, and like they're really trying to like just like, well, this is just the monthly payments, and they didn't say for how long or anything else. Just like, this is what it'd be. They're trying to get like a really naive person, I guess, to just buy into it. But anyway. That obviously didn't work out. I didn't go anywhere, and I just ended up walking out of the dealership. And they called me a couple weeks later when I was still looking, and I was getting tired of looking. And they're like, hey, I think we can make these numbers work or get things close to what you want.
You bloody well.
And I was tired. Yeah. Well, I was really tired of looking, so I'm like, okay, I'll come back in and talk to you. And I went in, I sat down, and I talked to them, and I had like exact numbers. So I'm like, if you can do this down payment, this term, this APR, I'll buy the car today. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And like, oh yeah, we can totally make that work. And it actually made me feel like, oh man, I went in with terrible numbers. If they immediately accepted this, I should have tried to be more aggressive with my haggling.
Yeah.
But anyway, like, yeah, we can totally do that. Like our finance person's out on lunch, so we'll just get started on the paperwork and they'll finalize it when they get back. So I'm there for like 30, 45 minutes doing this paperwork. And then the finance person gets back. And then my salesperson, whatever, goes to talk to them and comes back out. He's like, actually, this is the best we can do. And he gives me this number that was higher than the number that we had haggled down to the first time I went in.
Oh.
So I'm like, okay, well, this is the best you can do. Then I'll just, never mind. And I left. And that was on Saturday, a little over a week ago. And they're closed on Sunday. And then that Monday, I got emails, I got text messages, I got phone calls from the manager of that dealership saying, no, we felt so bad that we couldn't get your numbers to work, that your sales guy worked on it all weekend, and now we can do those numbers. Like there was something to work on.
What does work on in this scenario mean?
It doesn't mean anything because they put your information into a computer, and the computer comes back saying, this is the financing options we have through all of our different financing companies. There's nothing to work on. They're just like trying to jack up the number and make more money off of me. But anyway, so they sent me all these messages saying like, yeah, we can finally do your offer. Like explicit in text writing out like, this is what we can do. Like, perfect. I'm glad we can do this. And I took their offer to another dealership and got a car from them with their numbers instead.
That is ruthless. Wow, you showing no mercy.
So it worked out really well for me anyway, because I got it's a year newer. It's got a higher trim package and 15,000 less miles on it. So, and I got it for less money overall than they were offering.
Wow, yeah, you stuck it to that first dealership, didn't you? You really showed them who was the boss. You showed them who gets played in this scenario.
Yeah, I feel sorry for the people who go into dealerships like that and don't know exactly what they're getting into and don't know like exactly what to look out for, because I'm sure they get tons of people that way just by saying, oh, it's only this much a month, and people just sign the paper not looking at anything else.
Yeah, that's it's not fair. Some people don't have advisors or don't know about interest rates as thoroughly as other people. So I'm glad you showed them anyway, because I mean, offering someone 33% is criminal. It's preposterous.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, my final number that I got from actual cars like at 4.5%. So
that's right. Yeah, I've been looking at cars recently, and it's like 2%. I mean, that's like an offer, a special offer. But
yeah,
wow, 33%.
Well, if your credit is anything above awful, I'm sure you can get a better deal than mine. Student loans killed me. So,
tell me briefly about what a Flex is. They're certainly not in Australia. I've never heard of one before I saw your photo and I looked at the bumper and saw the Flex.
They're really interesting, to me at least. So what is now the Ford Flex was initially unveiled at a car show in 2005 as the return of the Ford Fairlane. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they're like, the Fairlane's a much older car that Ford used to make.
Right, a Fairlane is just your classic sedan, isn't it? With a higher trim level than like a Falcon, which is, I don't know if you have those, like a base model of the Fairlane.
Yeah, we did.
All right.
And I think the Fairlane came in like you could get it as a station wagon, and I think that's what that was originally marketed as, is like, look at this. This is the concept of a futuristic Fairlane station wagon. And that was in 2005. And then the Ford Flex, in its final form, came to market in 2009. And it's like this, it's not an SUV. It's like the size of an SUV, but it has more of the characteristics of a station wagon. And it's really unique. It's got a lot of space inside of it, and I like it a lot just because it's different. But it's kind of one of those love it or hate it designs.
Is it something like a Tarago? Like, do you know any of the Toyota Tarago or a Honda Odyssey?
I'm not familiar with the Tarago, but an Odyssey is just a minivan, right?
I always had it more in the class of a sedan, an oversized or station wagon, like an oversized station wagon, instead of a minivan. Minivans like are considered somewhat taller, something you could almost stand in, whereas this is certainly a car.
I guess the differentiating factor for me is the sliding back door. If the back door slides, it's a minivan.
Okay.
But
right. I like that. That's a good differentiator. So you have no sliding doors.
Right. And actually, in the original concept, they were suicide doors, so the back doors opened out the other direction, which never actually made it to the final design. But anyway,
they're terrible.
So it came to market.
Those reverse opening back doors.
Yeah.
My parents-in-law have one of those cars, and they just...
Oh, really?
Who thought this design was good? It's not. It doesn't work.
So, anyway, it came to market in 2009, and I think Ford was anticipating selling like 100,000 a year. And then, like I said, they averaged 25,000. And most of those are going to rental companies because they're big cars that people can use when they're traveling. So they're really popular with rental companies. And then they just left it. They just like made very minor updates to like the infotainment system over the next 10 years and have done nothing else, which is odd for a car styling to last that long. And now I think this is the last year of it. They're discontinuing it next year.
So it's going to become a collector's piece, and you've jumped on the bandwagon early. Or the station wagon early.
There's definitely like a niche community of like people thinking the Ford Flex is going to become some kind of, like collector car in the future. But I just liked it because it had 3 rows of seats, but it felt a little sportier than driving a minivan every day.
Have you joined up the FordFlexForums.com?
No, I'm not on any of the Flex Forum websites. I'm a member of the Ford Flex subreddit, which has a total of 10 posts in its entire history.
Subreddits are the new forums, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's I think it's FordFlex.net. There's actually a big site for Flex owners. But I don't know. I'm just going to drive it. I'm not going to get into the whole community of owning one.
But you have another car which you're more interested in, don't you?
Oh man.
Okay.
Yeah, I have my Camaro. It's broken right now.
The life of a Camaro owner. Oh, we always call them Camaros, so it feels weird saying Camaro.
Oh, really?
Life of a Camaro owner. I think we do. Now I'm lost.
Sounds like you're just saying camera with a O on the end. Camaro.
Saying camera?
Camaro. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Camaro with that real awkward in the middle.
That's definitely not how we say it, but I was driving it last week, and the clutch just lost all pressure behind it, like the master cylinder or whatever. I had lost all its pressure, and so now I was in the middle of driving and could no longer easily shift gears without trying to rev match or something. So now it's parked because it's kind of an expensive fix to replace like a master and slave cylinders for a clutch, because you got to take the whole transmission out. So you're talking like $3,000. And then while you have the transmission out, you might as well replace the clutch and the pressure plate and all of that. So it's just sitting in the garage for now. I'm not going to worry about any of that right now.
You need to sell the Flex to pay for the repair bill. I once had a clutch cable snap on a motorbike, and I managed to get it all the way, like a 15-minute drive through peak hour traffic on a busy road, just like,
oh man,
riding the throttle and like smashing it into first at stoplights and like wheeling it down the street. It was quite an experience.
Yeah, I did not want to deal with any of that. I was only like 10 minutes from home, and I'm like, I'm just going to put this in a parking lot and call a tow truck.
A wise choice. I cannot recommend the clutchless riding or driving experience. It's probably terrible for the gearbox anyway.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And I'm already fed up with the Camaro. I'm probably going to fix it and sell it. So
after all that work trying to get it back.
I know. Well, it's just one thing after another, and I'm getting tired of it. I forgot how expensive it was to own a 20-year-old car. So
it's terrible, isn't it?
It's really bad. Especially after these repairs, I'm going to be putting more money into repairing it than I actually paid for the car.
That's what pushed me onto the get a new car and rotate it every 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. Because
I had an older car, and it was an older BMW that pushed me onto it. I mean, that's like the worst choice of car because...
Yeah.
I mean, the Ks weren't even that high. It was like 60,000 miles, but oh man, it was costing like thousands and thousands of dollars every year in just parts that would go. And when you do the math, it works out. You could just pay off almost like a 1-year-old car.
Yeah.
Or almost the same you're spending on repairs, and then just turn over that car before it hits. Like, that's where my car is at the moment. It's approaching like 100,000 Ks, which is roughly 60,000 miles, and the service bills are starting to go up, and it's at this point that I want to sell it and get a car that doesn't have high service bills.
Yeah, definitely. That's when I was growing up, we couldn't go more than like 18 months with the same car. My parents were always swapping them out because if it had like more than 30 to 40,000 miles on it, it was too old for them.
Wow, they've got high standards.
My dad's just really into cars, and he liked getting new cars, so it wasn't really standards. It was just his hobby.
I enjoy cars, but not so much the buying part of it. Although I am looking forward to having a car with CarPlay, hopefully, at some point.
Yeah.
That's what's pushing me towards a new car at the moment.
I was just... My Flex is a 2018, and it's by far... Like, the car I sold was a 2010, and the difference 8 years makes, and the technology they put in cars is crazy. Like, this Flex has, like, adaptive cruise control, and it does the self-parking thing, and it's got, like, a built-in hotspot, and it's just... It feels like I'm stepping into the future.
There wasn't much movement from, like, you know, early 90s, like 80s to mid-thousands, was there, in car technology?
Yeah.
Admittedly, I wasn't looking to buy a car around the vast majority of that time, but having owned cars throughout that period... there were like cars early on that had lots of tech, and then because they were like a high trim level, but then you could also buy a car with almost none of that tech, and like from the start to the end, and there wasn't a whole lot introduced as far as tech went, or really anything.
Yeah, cars were mostly mechanical, and the changes were really just in like body styling.
Right.
And it seems like in the last 10 to 15 years, now they got all these new electronics they're adding every year.
What we need is Apple to have a car and then have an excellent trade-in program, and then to make great little videos about it too. Anyway, that's another topic. Should we get into our real topics for the day?
Sure.
Good morning.
Morning.
We have yet another MacBook Pro failure topic. My first question is, how much time should we spend talking about it? Or are we going to lose the entire audience? Admittedly, it's the top of the subreddit, 11,000 upvotes.
Yeah, my initial thought was definitely like, man, we're just going to... When I first read the post title, I'm like, we're just going to gloss over this. We've talked about failing keyboards so many times. But actually, after sitting down and reading this like really technical teardown of the keyboards, I mean, there's at least a few points to highlight here.
It was really well done, well written, thoroughly researched, and the Redditor CIL3X seems to even have plans to do an even more in-depth analysis. Maybe even using some like high-tech microscopes to work out what's really going on.
This is the first time that it ever occurred to me that the keyboard issue wasn't necessarily dust intrusion. Up until this point, I'd always just kind of taken Apple's word for it that like things are getting under the keyboard and that's what's breaking it. And I guess that's partially also just me going on experience. Like that's only ever been the failing point of keyboards is like something gets under it or something sticky gets in there, and that's how keyboards fail. But it seems to be like the conclusion that UCIL3X makes in this post is that it's just a really poorly designed keyboard that has actually really good like protection against dust intrusion, so that can't be the issue.
I think I had a few hints early on that it wasn't only the dust that was causing the problem. The first ones to me were when I had my MacBook Pro keyboard replaced, and the first one lasted quite a long time, like well over a year. But then subsequent ones in the same environment lasted like less than a month. So that was the first hint that this can't possibly be dust. And then the second one was when the new MacBook Airs came out with the gaskets, and then the first problem seemed to be reports of double bouncing the keycaps instead of like keys turning mushy, and that was the first problem with those.
Right. Which
I'm just
can't
grab
really be caused by dust.
A sweater because I'm really cold. Back in a sec.
Okay.
I'm like shivering in my seat. Let me go find something.
What is the temperature right now in Perth?
It's 17 Celsius.
What is that in Fahrenheit?
What's that in Fahrenheit?
Let me see.
Actually, it's gone to 8.
That is, oh my god, that's 62 degrees here. That's so warm.
So warm. Alright, I'm back with you.
That's actually the exact temperature it is here right now. It's 62 degrees.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. That's insane. What a coincidence.
So you think 62 degrees Fahrenheit is a reasonably warm temperature, hey?
My ideal weather is low 60s and sunny. Like any more than that, and I start to be uncomfortably hot.
If I was in the sun right now, I'd probably be fine, but being indoors, not so much.
Right. Yeah, I guess I keep the indoor temperature closer to 70, which I don't know what that would be, but let me see. That would be 21 degrees Celsius.
That sounds like a reasonable indoor temperature.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to walk around in t-shirt and shorts, which I do most of the time. So this user, he was actually an Apple repair tech, or an Apple technician at one point in his career. So he does have a pretty good background in pulling these apart and replacing them. Although I wonder how much keyboard disassembly the repair techs really did, because they're mostly just replacing entire components rather than pulling things down bit by bit.
Yeah, that's true. They just kind of swap everything at once.
So what's the conclusion of his post is that the gaskets are preventing the dust from actually getting in there, unless it's below like a certain micron size. Although another Redditor comments that to be smaller than, what did he say it was in microns? I can't see it now, but to be smaller than that, it's basically smoke. So we wouldn't be seeing, we'd be seeing this problem a lot more with smokers if it was down those lines of these like absolutely microscopic particles getting in. So the gaskets are really preventing the dust from getting in there quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has to be something else. And he's positing that it's probably the heating and cooling cycles that the computers go through. I mean, they're constantly heating and cooling as you turn them on, use them for something that pushes them, and then, I don't know, I was going to say watch YouTube, but that actually spins up the fans quite a lot. Let's say you stop watching YouTube for a minute and it cools down again. And the constant cycles that the components go through is causing the mechanisms to fatigue and to not function properly.
Really, that's not the conclusion I pulled from it, but so because he says that he pointed a heat gun at 300 degrees at these switches and was unable to see them warp or distort in any way. And so with that extreme heat test, he didn't think it was heating and cooling, but more likely just stress on the repeated distortion of the metal dome switches, eventually causing them to permanently distort in a way that makes them fail.
I didn't think his single heat test would really have been enough. And also, he probably didn't have any sort of magnification high enough to really tell whether that one heat cycle was doing any damage. So it's probably in conjunction with repeated use plus, in summary, the mechanisms are fatiguing for whether it's use or heating and cooling.
Temperature changes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, man. I mean, the long story short is that these are bad keyboards. They need a redesign. So
that is true.
But apparently there's maybe a bit of controversy, and Apple's misleading people with exactly what the issue is.
That's the other aspect of it. Apple's the one that added the gaskets to the latest keyboards, to the Gen 3.
Right.
Why would they do that if they didn't think the problem was dust? Or do we have a multitude of problems, and originally it was dust, whereas now it's fatiguing mechanisms?
Well, the keyboard he disassembled was a second-generation Butterfly, so it didn't even have the newer gaskets on it.
Oh, is that correct? I
Yeah.
missed that completely.
Yep.
Well, I take that back. But that still begs the question, why would Apple add gaskets if there was no dust even getting into the second-gen mechanisms?
Well, the hypothesis that he makes in his post is it says, it proves that Apple themselves have no idea how to deal with the issue, or that dust was either just an excuse to satisfy their customer base's demand for an answer, or their engineers are genuinely nowhere near as smart as everyone thinks they are.
A harsh criticism indeed. But I imagine they do have an idea. That's a fairly... it's a harsh judgment to pass on Apple engineers who actually designed this to start with. And I know it's not a design that's working well, but it is quite an intricate design and something that requires a bit of knowledge about how keyboards work. So I imagine they know what's going on.
I agree. There's no way they don't know.
Yeah. So there is, very much a disconnect between what he's saying and what Apple's doing. So it will probably come down to what happens in the next keyboard. What they do in the next keyboard is going to tell us for sure, based on Apple's analysis, what they recognize the problem to be and how they go about fixing it.
There's no way they can get away with not having a completely redesigned keyboard this year. I just don't see anyone being okay with that.
Certainly not the Apple subreddit.
Definitely not. But it does raise a lot of concerns for the typically really high resale value of these Apple laptops. It seems like the death of these keyboards is all but inevitable. So especially once this extended repair period is over, are these computers going to be worth anything?
That's the long-term damage that's going to affect the name of MacBook for a long time. I do wonder how much the non-Apple subreddit population who are actually buying Apple computers are aware of this problem.
Right.
Because as long as you still have masses of people buying laptops or lusting after laptops, the resale value will remain pretty good. But if people are doing their research and the very first thing that comes up is don't buy this computer because the keyboards are terrible, then we're going to start seeing resale values of MacBooks go through the floor.
Yeah. I actually am surprised that we saw the redesigned MacBook Air still use butterfly keyboards. I guess that was close enough to the release of Butterfly, whatever, Generation 3, that maybe they thought they'd solved the problem.
I wonder how... Well, the first problem with the MacBook Air's keyboards is it's actually double pressing the keys rather than getting, like, smudgy keys.
Right.
So it's possibly a completely separate issue. Unfortunately, just compounding the reputation of this keyboard.
I mean, maybe the older ones were actually more durable, considering you're able to dump baby powder on yours, and it still worked longer than any of your replacements.
It did, and that's the unusual thing. That was a good keyboard, the first one I had. All the subsequent ones were terrible.
What have our standards been reduced to that a keyboard that lasts a year is considered a good keyboard now?
True. Good point. One of the commenters actually works in keyboard tech, and he's saying that anything more than a 10-second debounce. So basically, when you let go of the key, the computer doesn't recognize like further inputs for a certain period, just as the key settles back into its spot. So saying more than a 10-second debounce is considered bad, and that's what people are I think some people have hacked their MacBook Airs with this like double pressing problem for a longer debounce time than that. But he's suggesting that it's possibly that the travel is so minuscule on these keys that once you let go of them, just the mere vibration of the keycap after you let go of it is hitting the switch again and causing the double strike of the key.
I mean, I'm sure that is a factor. That's not a new issue that engineers are having to work around. Debouncing button presses has been something that's been an issue and been resolved for decades, and it's usually as easy as putting a capacitor across the button. So, assuming it was something that simple, you would hope that engineering is sufficiently advanced at this point that they should be able to at least solve for that problem.
Well, I think we've done this topic to death, but it's bound to come up again. So I look forward to the next time we talk about it.
Probably next show.
Hey, I don't like that sort of pessimism.
This is the new AirPower.
You're right. Actually, it was AirPower before AirPower. AirPower was just a brief respite from talking about bad keyboards.
Yeah, the keyboard drama wasn't nearly this big a year and a half ago, though.
True, yeah.
It just keeps getting worse.
Yep. iOS is reportedly getting its own swipe-to-type keyboard. The very first time I used a swipe-to-type keyboard on my iOS device was about 35 minutes ago when I tested out Gboard to send you a message.
Oh, really?
I mean, I've used them before on other devices, but I never found them compelling enough to install as a default keyboard. I'm all about default keyboards. And the other attraction, actually, of Gboard is that it actually has Google's voice-to-text translation, which, as someone who uses voice-to-text as input quite a lot on my iPad, I thought, wow, I know that Google's version of this is much better than Apple's, so I might give it a shot,
right?
And get swipe-to-type as a little bonus on the side. But maybe we're going to see it built in iOS 13.
That's swipe to type is one of the biggest features that I miss from my Android phones.
All right, sell me on it.
Okay, well, so I'm going to compare this to T9. I'm sure that you owned quite a few standard T9 phones back in the day. So that was, I mean, my first phones were
and
all
probably
T9,
blindfolded as well.
and I got so efficient at typing on those. I still today, if you hand me one, I can crank out a text really fast on these keyboards without looking. Yeah, it's all muscle memory, which was great. After spending a significant amount of time using swiping keyboards on Android, I felt in a very similar way. Swipe to type it's almost not using a keyboard at all. Instead of thinking about typing on a keyboard when I swipe, I'm thinking about the words I'm saying, and each word is its own shape. So it's the swipe pattern on the keyboard I've just associated as shapes for the words, and I can do that without looking.
So are you already a regular user of
T9
of Gboard, or
and I've
of
never
any of
been
these
able
offerings?
to do that well on a tap-to-type keyboard. I've been really unhappy with how third-party keyboards are integrated in iOS, and not really unhappy. It makes sense for things like password fields that the default keyboard is going to take over for security reasons. And even things like quick replies, it gives you the default keyboard instead of letting you use whatever third-party keyboard you choose. And I really like a consistent user experience. So if I can't use the same keyboard everywhere, well, the only keyboard that I can use as the same everywhere is the default one. So that's what I've used. Back when I cared about jailbreaking, there was a keyboard called Nintype that I used on my iPhones. And it was a really good dual swipe kind of keyboard. So you could use 2 fingers to swipe a word instead of just one. And it was popular enough that it actually is offered as a third-party keyboard now, and I would suggest you check it out. It's got a little bit more of a learning curve than a standard swipe keyboard does, but it's definitely been...
How does a two-finger swipe keyboard work?
So, instead of every time you swipe, it's a new word, you still have to press the space bar between words. But by using two fingers, once you get efficient at it, it's way faster than even just swiping is. And you'll have to download it and try it out. It's got a really good tutorial, and there's definitely a learning curve. It took me a couple months to get really good at it, but it's by far my favorite keyboard after I got over that learning curve.
So are you using like two fingers side by side, and they're each writing one word after the other? No, that doesn't make sense.
They're both writing the same word. So if you think about how you type on a keyboard, when you have over four fingers going at once to type one word, versus if you're trying to type the whole word with one finger, instead of moving your finger across the whole keyboard to type the words, you have all your fingers already where they need to be. It's similar with Nintype, where you have two fingers, one on either side of the keyboard, so you have to reach across the keyboard ever. And it's really hard to explain. You'll have to try the tutorial.
I'll have to try it.
But I enjoyed it quite a bit.
I'll definitely need the tutorial. I mean, when I just installed Gboard half an hour ago, I was actually, the first time I used it, I was trying to swipe in the space bar, not getting anywhere. Why isn't this working?
Nice. So I'm really excited for a default swipe keyboard. I hope this is true, because this is one of the biggest things I miss from Android.
I wonder if this also means that Apple is not that interested in proving third-party keyboard support any more than it has, if it's actually making all these changes. I mean, we got some really good changes with iOS 12, didn't we? Or was it 11? I think it was 12. On the iPad, at least, where you can pull down on a key to get like the shift character, the one that's underneath it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's been really nice. I really don't think Apple is interested in improving third-party keyboards. When they announced it, I think this was iOS 8, they added third-party keyboards. When they announced it, it felt like a tacked-on feature. It's like, no, look, we have third-party keyboards now. We're just like Android.
Just a word in the feature cloud.
Yeah, and especially when it first came out, do you remember how laggy third-party keyboards were and how almost unusable they were?
I think I tried it for about 5 minutes and then was like, this is terrible. Delete.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was an issue with they were only allowing the third-party keyboards to use a very small amount of RAM, and they've since resolved that issue, and they're more responsive, but unless I can use it everywhere, I'm not interested in it. So I don't think Apple has done anything to improve third-party keyboards in the last 5 years, so I really don't expect them to do anything else in the future.
They've certainly worked on theirs. Such as holding down the space bar to move the cursor on an iPhone, or two fingers to move the cursor on the iPad. Yeah, I'm looking forward to more improvements in iOS 13. And not long to wait now, or at least until we get some dev betas.
Yeah, just a month from now, we'll know all about the new version.
We have another semi-regular topic. It's Spotify versus Apple Music. So now Spotify has 100 million subscribers, double that of Apple Music's last reporting. And I think that's possibly the last time we talked about it too. Apple Music had around 50 or 60 million.
Yeah, and it was at least hypothesized that Apple had just surpassed Spotify's US subscribers.
Right, but then you add in the rest of the world and suddenly Spotify has added another 50 million people there. And apparently, at least half of those are paid users. Now, Spotify has some pretty good deals, according to what Redditors say, in your country. And that could be contributing to such a high percentage of paid users. compared to what's previously been reported.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the article here. It says they've reached 100 million paid subscribers. So the 100 million is their paid subscriber count.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did I see it was half? Okay.
Well, I think it's paid. About half of their subscribers are paid subscribers, but that one half number is 100 million.
All right. So the real number is 200 million.
Yeah,
That's quite a jump over what we've previously read. It's an enormous jump.
Yeah,
it's like double.
That's man, that's 4 times. I mean, I guess I don't know. Is Spotify's free tier anywhere comparable to what Apple Music has to offer? I haven't used Spotify in so long that I don't even know what their offering is anymore.
As far as I know, the free tier is, I mean, you can't like play an album. You can just kind of play songs from an artist. You get ads between songs. Not sure about downloading things for offline playback. There might be some of that functionality there.
I seem to remember like you could skip a song like 10 times every few hours or something. Skipping. Yeah. So it's almost like a Pandora kind of thing.
Which people still use as well, apparently.
Man, I haven't heard the name Pandora in a long time, though.
I literally don't know anyone who's ever used Pandora.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, which was, I don't know, was it 2008, 2009? It was very early on in the App Store. They were a big deal. You could choose kind of like a smart radio thing, but I don't know why anyone would choose that over being able to pick the exact song they want to listen to now.
Right.
So,
Mental Recon comments that I love competition. Without it, these services would stagnate and become more expensive over time. That certainly rings true with me. And if there wasn't a Spotify, I don't see Apple like forever adding all these new playlists as they're prone to do and creating all this neat cover art for their playlists. The social features are a little bit lacking, but they are there. You can listen to what your friends are listening to.
I completely agree. I'll even go a step farther and say that if Spotify didn't exist, Apple Music wouldn't exist.
All right, we might still be stuck with the iTunes Store and paying 99 cents a song.
They had a great thing going. They were making a lot of money off of all these songs, and the only reason Apple Music came out is because they had to compete with Spotify's growing user base. So I think the existence of Spotify is good. Spotify has some really good deals. I know they very regularly have not only the free trial period, but like the $1 a month promotions happen a lot. They have bundles. I mean, they work with Google, so you can get buy a Google Home Mini and get a few months free of Spotify or something, or they can bundle it with Hulu. So Spotify is definitely competitive with their prices, even if they are, I think, averaging slightly higher than Apple's if you look at just their base price.
I wouldn't mind seeing some more discounts and offers come from Apple Music as well.
Well, hopefully we'll see that in the form of a bundle with all of their other services coming out this year.
The elusive Apple TV, Apple Music bundle.
Speaking of services, I've already canceled my News Plus subscription.
You and everyone else?
I gave it a try. I even paid for an extra month, thinking maybe this will get me into reading magazines, because it's not something I've ever done anyway.
What, now that you're giving money over?
Yeah, exactly. But it wasn't enough. I couldn't do it. It was just a waste of $10 a month. So
wait for the bundle, then maybe you'll get it for free later on down the track.
Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't mind having access to it, because they have a few magazines that I would like to read, but not that I'd pay $10 a month to read. So.
I mean, my opinion is that, I've said this before, the stuff I want to read is on the web. And even most magazine articles, at least to some degree, are published, in one form or another on the web as well. So,
right.
And the abundance of it is incredible. I mean, I've never looked at the internet and thought, wow, there's nothing new here for me to read.
Yeah. I'm never hurting for, like, I need to read more news or more articles. I can always find them, and I don't need another source of information that way.
Right. And the only draw of magazines to me is that there's more long-form content that I'm more likely to stick to read an entire article, especially if I'd paid for it.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. There's just I've given over money. It's more valuable to me. I should spend more time and read this article that's going to take me 15 minutes to read instead of skim through a website, read the first sentence of every paragraph, get to the bottom, and then move on to the next one, which I could admit to doing more often.
Yeah, there's definitely still this stigma, and it exists because there's some truth to it, that like online journalists aren't real journalists, which I wouldn't go that far as to say, but there's definitely, like, I'm tired of reading web articles that is like a slideshow where I have to click every paragraph to read the next paragraph, and every 2 clicks is an ad, and that leads to a really unpleasant experience. And there's a lot of purity to reading something in full long form in a magazine format. I'd like to see that come to the web versus just trying to buy magazines.
Yeah, it's certainly there in places, but there is an abundance of the other type that you described as well, which barely counts as journalism and mostly just as click farming.
Yeah, exactly. So, if Apple could do something about clickbait, just invent something to get rid of clickbait. That's my biggest complaint with online journalism right now.
At the last keynote, they described Apple News as like an anti-clickbait service, but I almost laughed when they said that in my sleep-deprived state, because I had a look. After they said that, I went and had a look at my Apple News. I installed it and had a look. Mm-hmm. And there was just, they don't control which sources are in Apple News, and so much of it was clickbait. So I wish I remember exactly what they said, but I did not agree that there was little or no clickbait in Apple News.
Yeah, I think the attention-grabbing headline is not a new invention. It's been around forever. So
exactly. Like the headlines that end in a question mark. If it ends in a question mark, then the answer is no.
Yeah.
So a little bit more iOS 13 talk.
Mm-hmm.
Mouse and trackpad support is apparently coming to iPad. We touched on this last episode, didn't we?
Yeah, it's funny that this was the exact article that I read that I had brought up in the last show. It's funny that it's still at the top of the subreddit 2 weeks later.
Well, it is 14 days old, so it could have come out on the day that we did the show.
Yeah, I think it was. I had just read it that day while we were recording.
Right, okay. Do you want to go over it again? Or here's a suggestion. We talk about Apple's trade-in, and then we could talk about Google I/O.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
It's just a suggestion.
That's fine. That's a good thing to touch on. I didn't even think about bringing that up.
All right, cool. So we'll just skip over the keyboard and mouse support since we already talked about it, and move on to Apple trade-in. So Apple's made a little advertisement, I guess you'd call it. Do one last great thing with your iPhone, and it's a neat little ad just showing an iPhone that's captured someone's moments through a period of their life, and then they've traded it into Apple and it's gone to another person, and it's all motivational and aspirational. And have you ever traded in an iPhone? I know I never have in my life, because generally the money you get back is terrible.
Yeah. Well, it's worth retelling the story because it's been a while, but I traded in my iPhone 10 for my 10s and had a very poor experience.
Your scratched up iPhone 10.
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. And it was in really good condition. It had the typical like minor scratches that just happen from putting it in and out of your pocket around the stainless steel bezel. But other than that, it was immaculate. It had Apple Care, so even if it would have gotten damaged at some point by ownership, I would have gotten it fixed, but it never happened. So I went to get the iPhone 10s and decided instead of dealing with the hassle of selling it, I would just trade it in. And Apple offered me something like maybe $200 less than what I could have got if I really was patient with putting it up online and selling it to someone who, the highest bidder or whatever. But it was worth whatever, not doing the hassle. So I sent them my iPhone 10, and I got an email from them maybe a week later that said, your appraisal has been changed because it wasn't in the condition that you said it was, which was like near perfect. And they said due to it being severely scratched, it was actually worth $0. And they could either keep it or send it back to me. And
so you let them keep it, of course, a free iPhone.
Yeah. So yeah, I had it sent back to me and then immediately proceeded to sell it for $100 or $150 more than what they had offered me in the first place, because it had no damage. And I, to this day, have no idea how they could have valued it at $0, even if it was severely scratched, which it wasn't. It just makes no sense to me, and I never got any clarification on that. And it's kind of turned me off to the whole idea of trading in a phone in the future.
So it's not actually Apple that's controlling this, at least not in Australia. It's a third party that runs the trade-in program.
Yeah, it's a third party. I don't know the name of the company anymore, but it wasn't Apple. It was another company doing the valuation.
You should have sent it on to the woman that always talks about being green at the keynotes.
Should just say like, yeah, you should have just let us keep it, because we would have cleaned it. We would have fixed it and given it to someone else. Environment. I mean, I did what they were going to do. I gave it to someone else to use. So,
right, yeah, it's not like you put it in the bin. There's recycling.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder, like, is this some kind of scheme to get people's iPhones, or I don't know, like, it had to have been a mistake somehow. They couldn't have looked at my phone and said, this is so damaged it's not worth anything. I don't know if it got mixed up with another damaged phone or what. I have no idea. But it was just a very weird experience.
The 2 or 3 times that I've quoted up trading in an iPhone, they've always been valued at $0. So that's my experience. It's never got to the point of me sending them the phone and them appraising it. I mean, maybe if that had happened, I'd get like a quote back that I owe them money for sending them this old piece of junk.
Yeah.
Well, I've never tried to trade in like last year's iPhone. It's always been like maybe like a 2, 3, probably not 4-year-old device. And the quotes always come back as $0. Like, you're not going to get any money for this. Whereas nearly any old iPhone you could get like a few $100s for on the classifieds.
Yeah. So,
and I certainly don't feel any qualms about doing that. I'm not putting the phones in the bin. It's getting more use. I mean, really the most painful part about the process is dealing with the classifieds. And I sold the iPhone 6 Plus that I had on... I actually tried it on Facebook Marketplace, and I would have literally taken over 60 inquiries about it before selling it. And it was just... it's a process. I mean, you have to have your hard skin on when you know what it's like selling things on the secondhand market.
Oh, yeah.
It can be the land of the tire kickers and the lowballers.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then even people who, I mean, of the people, it's probably 50% that actually show up to see the device and then, try to lowball you or whatever. It's not fun. And it was worth whatever the $100, $200 for me. But I ended up having to sell it anyway and have the additional headache of shipping them my phone and then having it shipped back and not having a phone for whatever the 3 weeks it was. It was in the post and then being evaluated.
There's an interesting comment from Alan Add Username who says, so if your iPhone 7 microphone stops working, the Genius Bar charges $319 for a new one and with a 90-day warranty. But what you could do is instead trade in that 7 for $250 off a new 7, which seems to go for $450, so bringing the total cost to $200. So for $200, you could come out with a brand new iPhone 7 instead of $320 for a repair of your existing one, and an extra bit of warranty on top of that.
Yeah, I wonder if you would actually get the $250 for a 7 with a broken microphone, though.
Yeah, I wonder how extensive their testing is. Not extensive at all. If your experience is anything to go by, they just make up something and send you back a $0 quote.
Yeah, that'd be worth trying. That's actually pretty clever.
Yeah, it's worth trying. It'd be interesting to hear if anyone manages to pull that off.
Yeah.
Do you have like bargain websites in the US where people are just posting like the best like deal hacks or prices or specials, and it's just like, it's kind of like a Reddit. You can upvote and downvote bargains, and so you've always got like at the top of the page like the cheapest things you can buy right now.
Not that I'm aware of.
I should look them up. This sort of thing would be on that page.
What's the site that you would use for that?
The Australian one is called ozbargain, ozbargain.com.au, so it wouldn't apply for you, but maybe there's something similar.
Huh. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's people who curate lists of that kind of stuff. Oh man, it looks just like
and then
Reddit.
Put it in like a Reddit upvote downvote format.
Yeah,
it works really well.
There
like the other day, someone discovered that like with McCafe, like every 5th coffee is free or whatever. But they discovered you could actually use that free coffee coupon for anything on the coffees list, which also included one where you could actually get one of those keep cups filled with a coffee. So it was like a $15, $20 keep cup for free if you used your coupon.
Interesting. I don't think McDonald's around here has cups you can keep. They're all just disposable.
Australian McDonald's a bit more green.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So,
Google I.O., how closely have you been keeping track?
I haven't been watching it live, but I read the headlines when they come up.
And do you also read the first line in every paragraph of the articles?
Yeah. I this is my extent of my research on I.O. so far. Is I watched one of those like Google I.O. in 5-minute YouTube videos.
Classic. That's exactly what I do. Go straight to The Verge's YouTube channel and watch Google
exactly.
I.O. whatever minutes.
I actually think this one was like 13. It's kind of a long one, but yeah. So I got the gist of what Google's doing.
Did any of it pique your interest?
The biggest thing that stood out to me is that Google was kind of bringing Nest even more in-house, and they're kind of merging like the Home Hub and Nest.
That was the most interesting thing to me. Why do you think they're doing that?
What I've heard is that the Nest development team has kind of been in chaos ever since the Google acquisition, because Google bought them, and it took them a couple years to crank out any new products. after Google bought them. And it's been a long time since I read these articles, but something to the effect of no Google employees wanted to go work on the Nest team because of just how disorganized it was. And their product lines have suffered as a result. And it seems like this is Google saying enough is enough. You guys are kind of disbanded now. It's all just going to be under our name. Except they're keeping the Nest name, which is kind of cool. And they're rebranding the Home Hub as the Nest Hub. So,
do you think that they think that there are like not great privacy connotations with the Google brand, and that now that they want to put like forward-facing cameras on these things that are always in your house, that changing it to Nest is just this nice, warm feeling, privacy conscious sort of brand or name that works a bit better rather than Google Home? I don't know. That's the first thing that came into my mind when I heard that they were rebranding.
That's an interesting thought, and probably has a lot of truth to it. I know I'm not a fan of bringing Google products into the house for those reasons, but I have no problem having Nest cams. There we go. That point. Combined with, I can never say his name right, Sundar Pichai or whatever, the Google CEO.
That's pretty close.
Yeah. He had a lot to say about privacy. And I just saw an article. I wish I could find it again. But kind of pointing out how Silicon Valley is transitioning our understanding of privacy from we won't collect your data to we're going to collect your data, but we won't give it to anyone else.
Yeah. Cross our heart and hope to die.
Yeah. But yeah, he did make a big point about like Google's renewed focus on privacy and adding incognito mode to a lot more products like Maps and Search. So I can definitely see where they're trying to refocus on privacy, or at least look like they are.
Yeah, that's interesting, adding incognito to Maps.
That's really interesting.
I'm not a huge Maps user, but I can't think of a situation where I would use it. Like, am I hiding this information from Google, or am I hiding this from people that I might share this information with in my family? Like, if there's any sort of automatic sharing features turned on, or is it just so that where I'm going isn't in my history? Which I think is what it is. Really, what it comes down to is that whatever you're looking at right now isn't going to be part of your location or search history.
Right. Yeah, I think it's what you're looking at, and maybe to an extent where you go. Like Google factors in so many things when they're doing targeted advertising or recommendations or whatever. And maybe by doing incognito mode in Maps, some of that location-specific targeting is disabled as well. But I don't know. Yeah, that was an interesting announcement to me too. I don't understand where I would necessarily want to use incognito mode unless I was, doing something suspicious. Like I want to hide from someone that's not Google.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I want to hide my Thursday night trips to the strip club so that I don't get advertisements for, I don't know, something that you might get advertised to about a strip club.
Yeah.
So Pixel 10R? No, Pixel 3a. Man, everyone's coming out with these low-cost alternatives. First we had the 10R, then we had the Galaxy 5e.
Yeah.
And now we have a 3A and a 3A XL. 10L Pixel.
Google's taking a very different approach to cheaper phones than Apple did. Whereas Apple tried to leave as many high-end specs intact as possible, resulting in a little bit higher price. Google's put in a mid-range processor and less RAM and no expandable storage. I think only a 64 gigabyte option, and really abandoned all premium materials for a plastic case, no wireless charging. I'll be really interested to see what the reviewers say after they had it in their hands for more than just an initial impression, because I feel like they're sacrificing maybe too much with this phone.
I think it's almost guaranteed that reviewers are going to trash it, but that it's probably still going to be very popular. What did they announce the price to be? It's $300 to $400, certainly less than $400, wasn't it?
I think $400 is the starting price.
Oh, it's the starting price. Okay.
Yeah, it was $400 for the 3A and $480 for the 3A XL.
I think there are a lot of people that want pixels and would jump on a low-priced one.
Well, this does open up a lot of markets. I don't know what carrier support looks like in Australia, but in the U.S., only Verizon and Google Fi have the Pixel, and most people who are going to Verizon, because not many people know about Google Fi, people going to Verizon are probably going to lean towards a bigger name phone like the Galaxy or the iPhone. I think a lot of casual users aren't even really aware of the Pixel. And the 3A being at a lower price, and it's also available on a wide range of carriers. It's going to be on our GSM carriers now as well. And I think that's going to open up a bigger market and really get the Pixel name out there.
I guess Android Q is one of the other headline announcements from Google I/O, but I mean, if you're talking about like I don't know if Google does TikTok releases, but this doesn't really seem like it's a huge release, does it? I mean, some of the biggest features are at dark mode.
Right.
You know, when they're doing a dark mode, that there's nothing huge out there. I mean, people love dark mode, but it's not groundbreaking by any means. New gesture navigation,
which is really close to the iPhones.
Yeah, exactly. Increased security, of course, there's always going to be that. A few other bits and pieces, but if those are the headlines, then it's not a massive release.
Yeah, there's seems like a lot of their advancements recently have been in Google's just Assistant. I know their Assistant is I don't know, what does it say, like twice as fast apparently now. I know when it was being announced, I said something to the effect like, what if your Assistant was so fast that it made tapping on your screen to do something seem slow?
Right, yep.
I don't know if it'll live up to quite that hyperbolized description, but it's an interesting thought. They also seem to be adding a lot to duplex, which was a really interesting feature when they announced it last year, being able to call and schedule appointments for you with real people. Now it's able to fill out web forms for you, kind of like autocomplete does on a lot of devices, but this is a lot more intelligent than just a basic autocomplete.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see where this goes. I mean, it might be really good as an accessibility feature as well, to have Assistant kind of navigate your phone for you, more or less. I mean, if that happens. So,
but yeah, Q definitely didn't feel like a big release for them. I think the biggest question about Q is, what's it going to be called?
Any guesses? I certainly haven't thought about it for more than the last few seconds.
No, I can't think of a single dessert that has a Q in the name. Do you have anything?
The only food I can think of is quiche, and that's certainly not a fruit dessert.
So I just quiche. I just typed Android Q names, and there's a CNET article from today. Let's see, with interview with Google's Vice President of Product Management, and he says, "We're super excited about the desserts. At the same time, Q is a hard letter, but we're looking at it." So it sounds like they don't have anything yet either.
Yeah, okay. I look forward to it. Actually, something just popped into my mind from I/O. Possibly the biggest, most exciting feature that I hope comes to Apple devices. When you have an alarm going off on any of your devices, you can just say stop, and it will stop the timer of the alarm going off.
Yeah.
No more keywords, no more Yo Siri, stop. Yo Siri, stop, as she doesn't hear you the first time.
Well, if you're wearing your Apple Watch, you can do it from there. You don't have to say Siri at all.
Really? Nice.
Well, yeah, all Apple
we haven't
Watches
talked
now,
about
you
much how you're using your new AirPods and the command that's always listening.
I don't use it a lot, but if I want to make a phone call, now I just put my AirPods in and say, Yo Siri, call whoever. That's pretty much my only use case. But it is convenient. The hardest thing for me is adjusting to the fact that I don't have to double tap to talk to Siri, because after owning the first AirPods for a year and a half, I really got in that habit, and I still do it most of the time. So I'll double tap, and then like my music will start playing instead of Siri coming up.
Because you reassign the double tap to something else.
Right? Yeah,
Is there an option to assign the double tap back to Siri?
I'm not sure. I'd never even considered trying to do that.
No, yeah. Well, you wouldn't, would you?
So, yeah, and I can't do it without pulling out my AirPods. But anyway, yeah, so getting used to that's been tricky. Other than that, the same AirPods I've always loved, so they're great.
How do you find like pairing reliability? Because I usually don't have an excellent experience like putting my AirPods in and having them like automatically connect, and certainly they would never like automatically start playing, or most of the time they don't automatically start playing what I was last listening to as well, which is a bit annoying. But actually saying that, most of the time it only happens when I'm just living the one AirPod in the ear lifestyle that I have problems like that. Do you ever use just one AirPod at a time, and how do you find the pairing?
The pairings worked fine. I do use one AirPod.
I should say connecting, sorry, not pairing. Like, I'm not talking about initial pairing. I'm talking about... Yeah, okay. Just to make that clear.
I don't use one AirPod very often. It's usually like if I'm at the office and I get sent a video or something and I want to listen to it really quick, I'll just throw one AirPod in to listen to it. But that's not my primary use for them. I did notice with my first generation AirPods, especially when they're getting a little older, that there was a lot of pairing issues where I would put them in and they wouldn't connect, and sometimes I have to like put them back in their case for a little bit and maybe toggle airplane mode on and off and whatever, try to get them to connect. It became really difficult towards the end, and I haven't had any issues like that with these new AirPods. They've always connected for me seamlessly. Even if it's just one, it's almost immediate. So I think they're definitely better, but I felt like my first generation AirPods were also really good when they first started. So I wonder if it's an age thing. I don't know how it could be unless the signal strength decreases with the degradation of the batteries. But for the time being, at least, they've been excellent. I haven't had a single time where I've had them not connect when I wanted them to.
Kind of from day one, for me, it was never that good at connecting automatically. Oh, really? Yeah, so if you're saying that it's flawless now, then that's probably the one thing that's going to push me towards getting it. Get that sweet H1 chip.
Well, it's sounding like we might see third generation AirPods before the end of the year.
I'd be so surprised.
I think it's just because they delayed these ones for so long. They're supposed to come out last September, and I'm sure they were waiting for AirPower. But they've had these done and ready, the second generation ones done and ready for like 6 months, and they've had this third generation that they've already been working on with anticipating releasing this fall. There's at least been some rumors that they're still going to go ahead with that schedule. I don't know how likely that actually is or not, but I think there was like YouTubers made whole videos about how, like, kind of clickbaity, like, oh man, AirPods 2 was the biggest waste of money, and the video is like, they're the best thing I've ever bought, but better ones are coming out in a few months, so I shouldn't waste my money on it.
You can't regret stuff like that until it actually comes out.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
But Yeah, these the third generation is supposed to be the big change from what I've heard, with maybe some water resistance and isolated sound and all of that. So I'm excited to see what they do next.
I would pay endless money for some sort of sound isolation.
Yeah, hopefully that means they fit in your ear a little better too.
Yeah. Well, I'm James VDM on Reddit and Twitter.
And I'm Jellywoot on Reddit and Twitter.